Morning, everyone. My talk is on hepatitis A, and I must confess that there are so many outbreaks, so I was chosen towards the end of my talk to illustrate a few rather than to make a massive list of outbreaks due to anything. The history of hepatitis A goes back 2,000 years. Hippocrates understood that there was a benign form of jaundice that passed over, and which was in contrast when you have a heavy body mass of cancer. So he understood things right there. For long, the hepatitis A was thought to be due to a mucus bile plug, and pathologists looked for it and never found it. What really triggered the whole thing of research was soldiers who went to various war theaters during World War II in America, and they got various kinds of hepatitis, and that's an effort from the government starting experiments. There are some very controversial experiments done in Staten Island, Willowbrook School by not Bloomberg, Baruch Bloomberg. No, it was not Baruch Bloomberg. It was someone. Oh, anyway, where they infected children who were mentally retarded, and they got hepatitis, and they were able to make out what is long incubation and short incubation time. And they ended up with sera, which were very key importance when the virus was identified. Such reagents were carried further into the Joliet prison experiments outside Chicago, and then it was the fate of Stephen Feinstein at the American National Institute of Health to identify the hepatitis A virus particle in 1973 using immune electron microscopy. Actually, in the beginning, I thought it was a parvovirus, but it's a picornavirus. It's this, as I said, picornavirus. It's a single-stranded RNA virus which replicates via an A-strand intermediate. For a short while, when I started my PhD study, it was called enterovirus 72. It was thrown out of the enterovirus families. It's now a member of its own genus, hepatoviruses. It's very stable. It's one of the most stable viruses, and compared with poliovirus, it has a stability that is about 20 degrees higher than poliovirus, which as such is thought to be rather stable. It will survive for 1 year in mineral water at room temperature. It can inactivate, of course, that is by heat. Instantaneously it will be destroyed, the activity will be destroyed at 85 degrees. If you use chlorine, glutaraldehyde, you can destroy it also. Formaldehyde is not used for destruction in an environment, but that is the formula used in the vaccine production. Interestingly enough, you can diminish the inactivation by adding things like protein, milk, etc. So if there is other proteins available there, the inactivation is less efficient. And as you know, this is a non-enveloped virus primarily, and non-enveloped viruses are not inactivated by alcohol, ether, chloroform, lipid detergent, or SPH. This is the genomic organization, it's a coronavirus with 4 viral capsid proteins and a number of enzymes coded by the viral genome, and we can leave that. It is translated in the body via a start of the translation at the internal ribosome and enterocyte, which then translates the entire open reading frame, and which is then cleaved into the viral protein by proteases, and then there is a formation of first pentamers and then 12 pentamers form out the 60 copies of the viral capsid. This is now being solved. I will show a picture by cryo-electron microscopy. It's not crystallography as far as I know. 60 copies, as I said, and it has some features. It doesn't have this impression, the canyon of the enteroviruses. There are neutralization sites on the outer edges, and there are several proteins that are produced intracellularly, which do not use for diagnostic purposes. This is a picture of the viral copy. So this is what it would look like by standard electron microscopy. You see some empty particles and some, and here's the full line. So there are 60 copies of these trimers, and they have a meeting at 5 and 6 prime axis. The putative virologists love to talk about how does the virus bind to a cell. The putative cellular receptor is also classically characterized at the NIH. It is a molecule that sits across the membrane. It's a transmembrane, immunoglobulin-like and mucin-like glycoprotein, which is called TIM1. It has an extracellular domain binding the virus, and it will bind to the virus in the intestinal mucosa, where the virus first, when you ingest it, will have a short secondary replication. Then the virus will move to the liver, where the real replication occurs in the hepatocytes, and mature viruses are shed into the bile and then go into the feces. However, and in this they are shed as naked particles. However, and I will illustrate that later, like hepatitis E virus, which is also a transmitted virus, it will, when in serum, capture or hijack cellular membranes, so it will travel in the serum, in the blood, protected by cellular membranes, hidden, so like borrowing someone's overcoat. Some people don't believe that this is the receptor, that things are more complex, but this is as far as I know. Interestingly enough, this cellular receptor of hepatitis A is also involved in regulation of allergy or atropine. And in countries where there's a lot of hepatitis A, there's less allergy. If you clean, you make your country more clean. And well, Sweden is one of those things, countries where they've been clean for many decades. We have much more allergy. And there are 4 or 5, 30% of children back home in Sweden have some kind of allergy, including asthma. This TIM molecule is a key molecule bridging hepatitis A and allergy, and this molecule is presented on CD4 cells and a strong allergy regulator. It is present in it is coded from chromosome 5. And actually, it is this variant. There are several variants. There's a polymorphism. You have another 6 amino acids in this TIM molecule. That is where there's people. So the link to allergy is mostly linked to this people who have that polymorphism. And I don't know how common that is in Sweden, but. There is a study here showed by McIntyre, who focused on the lower panel here, people who have hepatitis A antibodies, not acute, but convalescent. If they have this extra 6 amino acids, they have 48% atopia, whereas if they don't have it, it's 79%. So, this is not a 100% clean distinction between allergy and not, but there is a link there, and that has been served over and over again. You can also say if you have a clean country with little exposure to antigens, you may possibly have more chances for getting allergic to the different things. So now that was confusing. If you have a clean country, you're not. If you have a country with many antigens and virus circulating around, that they may somehow consume the risk of generating allergy. The virus comes into the hepatocytes, it goes and it's transcribed and it's generating new viral particles, and it's also made a minus copy. And as I mentioned, when it goes into the biliary, it goes naked when it goes into the cell. And this is kind of new for these viruses, that they have this shield of cell protein. The pathogenous is it only affects primates, that's good for vaccine, etc. Short duration in the intestinal crypts, and then replication in the liver and when it grows in cell culture, that was my thesis work 35 years ago, it doesn't give any cytostatic effect. It starts instead in the host cell inflammatory response, T cell cause damage, and it recruits various population of T cells. Interestingly enough, as some of you may know, you know that Epstein-Barr virus, which is a DNA virus, it induces a polyclonal IgM response across many specificities, and this is the same for hepatitis A. And all over the years I've studied this, I've never come across a good explanation. So polyclonal IgM stimulation. It shares also several features with other RNA viruses like HCV, like Zika virus. It inhibits the regulatory factor 3 pathway, IR3, via the reguide signal, and it also Zika virus inhibits TLR3. It does not cause any NF-kappa B. And interesting enough, hepatitis A does never become chronic, so there is no chronic stage. And for hepatitis E, that was also said, but recently for hepatitis E, it's found that in immunosuppressed people, but this you can get chronic hepatitis E. Hepatitis A is not that scale. Well, the clinical presentation, you all know that incubation of 2 to 6 weeks. There is a prodromal syndrome time when you have fever, and fever was in the past thought to be very pathognomonic for hepatitis A. Fatigue, then you get scarlet feces, you get yellow in your eyes, and you can get jaundice. Whereas in children, it can be a rather asymptomatic disease. Mother may notice dark urine. It's self-limiting, although very much causing fatigue, and there is a mortality about 1 per mil. There is a new feature that is first described from Israel, and that is that you can have relapsing hepatitis. And so you get well after some weeks, and then you get a new round, and then you get a new, and then so you can have it not chronically, but for several months, perhaps even up to a year, I read. And this are the features of the virus: incubation period, virus in the liver, virus in the blood, and that can be possibly longer. This is where the liver enzymes and the symptoms come, and that means that during this time you have virus in the feces and the blood, you are infectious. So normally when you put people into hospital with hepatitis A, they have already passed the infection part of that disease. So if you isolate hepatitis A cases in the hospital, that's normally useless in a way, because there were infections when they were told before they got jaundice. The infectivity, the ability to spread to other people is much less. I mean, it's not zero, but it's much, much less in the exterior period than before. Diagnosis is clinical. You have this ALT elevation and jaundice and bilirubin, and then you start contact tracing. See, well, which child has transmitted this to this person, etc. And that will sometimes reveal that there were many people around that had similar symptoms in the past, but they never went to the doctor. You use a simple anti-serologic test, which is IgM, and then you can use an IgG assay to see if that person is immune. In the most recent variants of IgG assays, you can even sometimes monitor an increase of the antibody. That was not possible in the past with the inhibitory assays. More interestingly is the virus RNA studies, which you can use for detection of virus and also for phylogenetic. And as I said, if you go have hepatitis A, you can take that message home and you do an Epstein-Barr virus test. You may get the positive results, and you believe that child has Epstein-Barr, but it is perhaps hepatitis A. So always when you have this idea up with your children with liver infection, do the two tests in parallel. The overall epidemiology, as I said, is a fecal-oral transmission. I will give an example. Raw seafood. I mean, in some parts of the study, it's very mature to eat raw oysters, and in areas where the water is dumped, and in the same areas the oyster beds, then you can to get hepatitis A. Everything that you cannot wash it can transmit. If you contaminate with manure for human feces, so raspberries are difficult to wash. Strawberries somewhat lighter, but not true. Fruit, ice cream, salad are all carriers of hepatitis A at some time. In particular, if those are harvested by migrating populations, such as in America, where you have migrant Mexican workers going up and down, and they're living under less good sanitary conditions. Hepatitis A associates with low economic status, socioeconomic status, and so as long as the sanitary situation in a country improves, then hepatitis A goes away. It's a childhood disease in many countries. I saw a study many years ago from Peru where 90% got hepatitis A within a few years of life. So now jaundice in many children, it is in developing countries, and that is of course increased in daycare center settings. Families are spreading it, so often you have a risk. Men who have sex with men are at very high risk. However, you had this infection once and you have then control of it. So there are patterns where you have an increasing prevalence with age. In a country like a developing country, this curve of IgG goes up very rapidly in pre-age. In many countries like in Europe, it goes up gradually throughout life, and perhaps reaches 50-60% at the age of 60, 70 years of age. In Sweden and a number of countries that have controlled hepatitis A, there was virtually no immunity in people born after World War II, unless they are vaccinated or they have immigrated. So then we have this steep rise of those who are born in 1920s, and there were very few people who are born in the 1920s and 30s around. So there are different patterns. And this is illustrated. So childhood exposure 95%, transient phase. That is interesting too. When you improve, you start to see hepatitis epidemics, because then you have some parts of the population who are never exposed as children. They grow up perhaps in better areas of the town, and then they go downtown restaurant that has not high hygienic standard, and they are getting infected, and they get jaundiced, and they can be quite sick. We actually had the very same pattern with poliomyelitis virus. That was also a disease that has vanished with better hygiene. Some people say water closet maybe. So as long as you have dry closets or you defecate in outdoors or wherever, then the risk of hepatitis A and polio is large. When you have water closets, much less. And then we have this. We had the last really big epidemic in Sweden, a refugee coming after World War II. Is it also transmitted via blood? That is very controversial, and I believe that was my very, very first PhD paper, and we found it being the dominant group of people was intravenous drug addicts. And Wolf Schunes, New York Blood Center, he was quite taken aback with it. Anyway, it's found by PCR for several weeks. And as I said, this virus might hide from the immune system by having this cellular envelope. And there are cases of hepatitis A among transfusion recipients, and that has meant that people who do NAT testing of blood donors, they do now NAT testing against hepatitis A as well. It is, as I said, common to brain drug users, and we found major outbreaks in 1973, 1975, 1979, 1984, and 1994. I mean, that was the completely dominant group, and you have seen major outbreaks in the 79 and 84. It was genotype 2A, and now more recently I will show it was genotype 1A. Well, any virus that can be infectious is of course extremely infectious when applied intravenously, and then the patients can, when they are in the acute phase or in the prodromal phase, be infectious. So just to remind you, this is the virus in blood, and some people found it even longer. And if you inject that blood into someone else, it's effects. Of course, these drug addicts also live under poor hygienic conditions. A vaccine has been generated since you can grow the virus, and that is inactivated by formalin. There's also a attenuated vaccine that is used in China, and that is safe. The vaccine which we mostly use is from the GSK, Havrix, and they give it in 2 doses, 1 year apart, 4 weeks apart, sometimes 1 year, and that gives a very robust seroconversion of 99%. Interestingly enough, there was a camp of, this was being verified, being protected. There was a camp of Jewish boys upstate New York who every year there was an outbreak of these young boys with hepatitis A. And they got an outbreak, and we did an intervention, and they vaccinated as quickly as they probably through that camp. And up to 21 days, there were new cases, because these were children who were already been incubated. After 21 days, there was no new case. This is always the case when you start to vaccinate in an epidemic. You will still already have somebody who is infected and who you can never protect. But vaccine as such has now replaced the use of immunoglobulin. I don't know how it's in the Baltic countries. Are immunoglobulin used much? Use it? No, I mean that is replaced by the vaccine. Particularly if the exposure is less than 2 weeks ago, and this can be combined with hepatitis B vaccine and used in a global fraud. Control our hygiene, introduce water cloths, and of course they should work. And we should avoid sewage fed to seafood banks where you grow oysters and other shellfish. And forbid human manure feces used for agriculture of fruit and salad. I learned this next thing in Egypt: peel it, cook it, or forget it. And I think that could be true. So if you're standing there hungry over a market in southern Spain or in Romania, think twice before you eat that lovely looking fruit that can be contaminated on the surface. As I said, intramuscular immunoglobulin has been used, it's phasing out, and we have the vaccination, and that vaccine is probably a lifelong effect. We can genotype virus, and we were in on the first paper by Robertson et al., and you could then sequence a small part of the region. Many of the amino acids are the same between genotypes, so these are silent mutation occurring in the third base position, which means that the amino acids do not change, and there are different targets used for typing. In hepatitis A, there are 6 genotypes, major genotypes, and there are a lot given Roman. That's 1 to 6. There was even a 7, which is now downgraded to 2B. 1A and 1 and 2 in A and B infect humans. 3 was the funny thing that it infects both apes, as small apes, and as well as humans. And 4, 5, and 6 are purely infecting monkeys, and you have figures defining what is a genotype and a subtype. So we are encountered 1A and 1B majorly, 2A and 2, so here's a should be 2B, and 3A and 3B. These are the ones that we see, and from those, 1A is the most common, and there's only one serotype of hepatitis A, meaning if you are protected, if you acquire one infection, you are protected against the others. This is our old CDC picture showing the distribution of in regions of 3,582 sequences as put together by the CDC in Ireland. I have some local data in Sweden, and we collected and we store samples, and we have gone through the infections in the last 20 years, and we find virus in the serum, which we use for IgG diagnosis quite often, and we can then link them to the risk groups, and we can find out how they work. And this is a tree, this is a phylogenetic tree showing, you can see here, this color is green, is 1994, and this is 2004, so this is part of the thing. And all this green means that we had a major shared outbreak. This was drug addicts in 1994. And you can see here are, down here are some more drug addicts, and here are other small groups, and they occur. Interestingly enough, these are homosexual men. These are two waves of an outbreak among homosexual men that spread from Denmark to Sweden to West Sweden to Norway, and they were all the same. Interesting also enough, and part of my talk here is this thing here. This was a 5 minutes, okay. This was brought in a Turkish family and infected several generations of people. Well, this we can skip. In Europe, we have 1A, 1B. We have this clonal outbreak, as I said, and we have, well, this I already mentioned. We can also sometimes see that the sample comes from a special region, and we do not have a special Swedish strain. When we get a 1B strain, it can always be sure it comes from the Middle East. We have quite an influx of refugees or people who move from the Middle East. We have 3A, which was in the drug addicts, and we have rarely we have 2. This is a difficult picture, but this is what I could get from the ECDC when I was added this thing to talk about outbreaks. But here, for instance, in Bulgaria, they have like 3,000 to 4,000. Some countries have very high levels, and others have less. Czech Republic, this is 2008 figures, about 1,500, and then you see it goes down. And a number of countries have outbreaks like that. For instance, we have an outbreak in nearby Latvia around 2008, 2009. We have an outbreak in Italy, also quite recently, and I will show you that. And they have different reasons. So let's go here. This is the Latvian outbreak. Actually, what you can see here, there was almost 0.5% of mortality. This was from 2007, 2008, and perhaps extending a little longer. And they all had the same genomic sequence, the 1A sequence. So they were shared, and there was a strong group of intravenous drug users. So the intravenous drug, but there were also restaurant-related outbreaks in Latvia. So and they also spread to families, etc. So once you get above a special cutoff level, it can start to spread in various parts of the country. And this is 2013 to 14 a map of Europe, and you can see here Italy has been leading, and it has also been spread into Norway. And some of this is people traveling to Italy as tourists, but the majority is spread via frozen fruit. So frozen raspberries, frozen strawberries, and obviously there's people who harvest those have poor conditions, so they contaminate. You can see the spillover in this ECDC report to others. In the United States, you have pomegranate seeds that have spread hepatitis A. I mean, you can think about everything that at one time. There was peppers from some place in Asia some years ago, and ice cream, dairy products, and we heard from Mikhail that you also have contamination of water wells. There was in Norway, there was a homosexual man who got hepatitis. The water from his well seeded into a neighbor's water well, and a little girl got the strain of a homosexual outbreak. So now I'm at my summary. This is a unique coronavirus in a separate genus, hepatovirus. It's stable physically and genetically. We have a simple diagnostic test. We have clarified the epidemic, and there are breakthroughs once in a while, fecal-oral transmission, and I forgot really. There's one thing I forgot to mention, and that is the daycare center outbreaks. We have a large population of immigrants in Sweden now, and they come to Sweden. They come from endemic countries, and they grow up and feel protected and go home to their countries from which they have fled on vacation, which is a little strange, but they do that. And there they bring the children who are brought up in Sweden, and they get hepatitis A infected, and when they come back, they spread it into from the daycare centers, and the staff of the daycare centers get hepatitis A. And that's repeated over and over and over again, not only in Sweden, but in several countries. And we have also perhaps a need to have an international survey. So if you send out pomegranate seeds or some strawberries across Europe, the only way to really find out whether they're related and is to have an international reporting system, and there is such one originating in Holland. There's no chronicity, lifelong immunity, and there's a vaccine available, and still we have a lot of advertising. We are not implementing vaccination as we should have done. So, and this, I think, was the last slide. It was almost in time.